Welcome to the 902 Podcast, the official podcast of the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office in Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm Captain John Vick, and I want to thank you for listening. This podcast will give you an inside look at LSO with topics and guests to discuss public safety issues impacting Lancaster County. Be sure to subscribe for highlights on news, cases, and the people working for you at LSO. You can also follow us across social media at LSO Nebraska on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Hey, it's Captain Vick with the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the 902 Podcast. And what we want to talk to you about today is numbers. We're in the middle of Police Week here, 2024, and numbers is something we spend a lot of time focusing on in law enforcement. Numbers when it comes to crime statistics, numbers when it comes to maybe proactive traffic stops, different neighborhoods, different reporting districts, all sorts of things that we have numbers that we track on a pretty daily basis when it comes to law enforcement agencies. But the number I want to talk about today, a timely topic, especially with Police Week and Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Day coming up, is the number 58. And that is the number of law enforcement officers that have been killed in the United States of America so far this year. And there's a breakdown further from that. 22 were killed from gunfire, 22 were auto-related, 7 were medical incidents, and another 7 were in some other type of incident. But this is a statistic that is kept on a daily basis by people like the Officers Down Memorial page, the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund, but it's the way that we pay tribute and also just remember those that have paid the ultimate sacrifice within the law enforcement community. And it's also a way that we try to, I guess, make ourselves better as a profession and as an industry in law enforcement and public safety, to just constantly remind ourselves of the stakes of this job, and the stakes of this job can ultimately be laying your life on the line, hopefully in service to your community. So with that in mind, there was an initiative that came up a number of years ago, back in the early 2010s. It was about 2011. There was a program called Below 100, and it was an officer safety initiative that came out. The Lancaster County Sheriff's Office participated in this as well, and I was lucky enough to be an instructor in the curriculum and instructed our agency in the Below 100 program. And when it came out, there were a lot of misconceptions about what Below 100 was. A lot of people thought that was a number like a speed limit or something, and these are just people coming in here to tell us that we can't drive fast when we need to drive fast and things like that. But when I was able to take the instructor course and learn more about it, and then ultimately ended up teaching courses myself, I learned exactly what that number was. And although the curriculum does have something to do with speed, the number actually refers to the number of law enforcement officers who are killed in any given year in the United States of America. And the goal of that program or that initiative was to bring that number, as the title implies, below 100. And the last time that that's actually happened in the United States of America was actually during the World War II era, 1943, 1944, depending on which source you go to for line of duty death tracking. But that was the last time in the United States of America that less than 100 law enforcement officers died in the United States in any given year. So actually, if we look back, in the last several years, 2023, the statistics just came out for that year, have actually been the best year. Best is really the wrong word to use, but it have had a pretty dramatic decrease in the number of line of duty deaths. The Officer Down Memorial page, or odmp.org, has that number to 137. If you go to the Law Enforcement Officer Memorial Fund, they have that number at 118 for 2023. But one of the better years when it comes to law enforcement officers that have died in the line of duty, but certainly still tragic for any family that has had to endure one of those losses. I mean, one is one too many. But we also realize that this is a dangerous job, and dangerous jobs are not done without some level of risk. So the big thing that the Below 100 program, I guess, really tried to set in our minds when we were taking and then teaching the class was, if there was one thing that we could control, we're never going to be able to reduce all of the deaths that occur in a dangerous job like law enforcement. But what if we could control the preventable deaths? What if there was something that we could do to drive down that number, so at least we could improve the numbers and get those people back home at the end of their shift where they belong? And so the Below 100 program came up with an initiative that had 5 tenets that are very simple, straightforward, and doable, but just because they're simple doesn't necessarily make them easy. So those tenets are this: wear your belt, wear your vest, watch your speed, win what's important now, and then the 5th one, remember, complacency kills.
If you want a challenging career, a career where you can make a difference in your life, your family's life, and the lives of those in your community, come and join the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office. To learn more or to apply, visit us online at www.joinlso.com.
So in the curriculum, we spend a lot of time going through various videos and things like that to show law enforcement officers, what can happen. I mean, and we know what can happen because we're on the streets every day and we respond to crashes. We see bad things happen. But for some reason in law enforcement, and this is just something culture-wise that we're trying to change, we sometimes take on this thought process to our own demise, unfortunately, that sometimes we're invincible, and that sometimes the bad things are going to happen to somebody else, but they're not going to happen to us. And so wearing your belt, referring to wearing your seatbelt in a car, is one of the easiest things that we can do to help our survivability when it comes to some of these events from happening. And Gordon Graham is a big voice in the law enforcement and public safety industry. He's a former law enforcement officer, attorney. Now he has his own private consultancy risk management firm, and was co-founder of Lexpol. But one of his famous lines is, "Predictable is preventable." And the fact remains that vehicle-related incidents were one of the leading causes of death, if not the leading cause of death, for the majority of the last couple decades when it comes to law enforcement officer death. Now, I know we have COVID in there, and I think there's a little bit of an asterisk anytime we talk about COVID when it relates to statistics and fatalities and things like that. But those auto-related accidents or crashes, we try not to call them accidents anymore because there's usually something that could have been done to prevent them, have been a big part of what's responsible for line of duty deaths. And so we really harp on those things. So wearing your belt and watching your speed. And it seems kind of strange, especially if you're not in the law enforcement community, to hear us, we're writing speeding tickets, we're writing seatbelt tickets. Why would you would think that law enforcement are the last people that we have to talk to about something just as simple as putting on your seatbelt, something as simple as watching your speed and not going faster than you need to. But law enforcement officers are exempted sometimes in the right situations from speed limits, and sometimes we do have to drive fast to get there. And so there's a little bit of an education and management piece and just cultural piece that comes into that when we're trying to teach young officers, young deputies, how to navigate, that extra responsibility, I think I'll call it, of when you do violate certain traffic laws with a valid reason, how to navigate that, how to make those decisions. When is it appropriate to do that, and how can I do that safely, not only for the community around me, but for myself. And, sometimes we're not just killing ourselves as law enforcement officers. Unfortunately, there's a lot of stories out there where citizens in our community have taken, a loss because of something that a mistake that a law enforcement officer has made. So these are really important conversations that we're having with within our agency, with our young recruits that are coming up through field training, through the academy process, and making sure that they understand that with that added authority and that added ability to be able to violate traffic laws in certain circumstances comes a lot of extra responsibility. And so a good stat that we use, the difference between an officer driving 80 miles an hour and 100 miles an hour over a 10-mile distance is only going to make a difference of 90 seconds. But in the event of a collision, in the event of some unplanned event, it adds a tremendous amount of additional force. It extends braking distances, and it makes a vehicle much, much more difficult to control. And so we have to weigh that out in the grand scheme of things. When I'm choosing a speed that I'm going to be driving to respond to an incident, there are some times that 90 seconds can absolutely make a difference. If we've got, an officer that's involved in a fight or heaven forbid, a shooting or something with a subject, 90 seconds might be a big deal. If we've got a citizen in a call that's suffering some sort of, life-threatening emergency, 90 seconds might make a big difference. But we have to be honest that there are a lot of calls that we go to that 90 seconds might not make a big difference. And so we try to show that as an example to our folks so that they can see that, high-speed driving sometimes does have a place in law enforcement, but we have to be very, very careful about when we're choosing to do that, because it can not only have negative effects on ourselves, but also on our community. And so those two things playing together, both the seatbelt and then also watching our speed, can play a big role in preventing some of those preventable line of duty deaths that unfortunately creep into those numbers. But moving on then to wearing our vest, and this would be something else, that somebody outside of law enforcement might think, well, why wouldn't we wear body armor? Why wouldn't we wear bulletproof vests? And the reality is that sometimes there are excuses that we come up with that to get rid of that. And there are excuses that law enforcement officers make, just like people make, I'm sure, in a lot of different jobs and in industries for, sometimes cutting corners, maybe sometimes just kind of being complacent, being lazy. And sometimes we say, gosh, they're too hot, they're too uncomfortable, doesn't fit. Maybe I'll just get it when I need it. We sometimes get into that complacent mindset that it's never going to happen to me. It's never going to happen here. And unfortunately, we see a lot of examples where that's just simply not the case, because it does happen. And so it's something within our law enforcement culture that we've had to make some policy changes to actually mandate body armor wear especially in certain positions when it comes to uniform operations. And we talk about courageous conversations a lot of, again, going back to that predictable is preventable mindset of things that we have to take on amongst ourselves to make sure that we're reminding each other being safe means wearing our vest, wearing our belt, watching our speed, all of those things. And so these tenets that we keep talking about, we actually have those up on signs, around our office. We have conversations about it. I know there's a deputy here in our office that if he ever catches me, without my vest on, he's going to slap me on the back and remind me that it's important that I do that, because we care about each other and want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to be safe and protect ourselves so that we can go home where we belong at the end of the day. So the next one is WIN, and that's WIN. It stands for What's Important Now. And this is another thing that came from kind of the sports world, but I think Gordon Graham kind of at least brought it into prominence within our industry. But it's thinking about, we always have a tendency to have our mind wander and what am I doing next? What happened yesterday? And sometimes we get lost, in all of the just the busyness of our lives, that sometimes we forget about what's important right now. Before I think about what's next, if I'm at point A, what do I need to do right now in point A that's going to allow me to get to point B? And sometimes, especially when that's, law enforcement related, it has everything to do with, a decision I need to make right now, whether that's an operational decision, some sort of ethical, moral decision. If there's supervisory decisions for those of us that are in supervisory capacities, maybe if you're an officer, it's simply just the traffic stop that I'm on. Do I need to be worrying about the next call that I'm going to, or do I need to be worrying about the traffic stop that has some unknown risk factors that I'm working on right now? Do I need to wait for backup before I go on this call, or do I go it alone? Do I have the equipment that I need with me right now, rather than worrying about the equipment that I have to take to some training later on this week? It's again just focusing on what's important now. This also falls into our personal life too, or just collectively our own health and wellness. And we're talking a lot about wellness these days, but physical health, mental health. If I'm not taking care of myself right now, that might last me a little while, but over time, we have to make sure that we're building up, that resiliency, both in a physical sense when it comes to staying in shape, eating right, getting enough sleep, but then also mental health, and not operating, on the burning both ends of the candle, so that we're getting so stressed out and burnt out that we don't have any gas left in the tank, so that we can handle what needs to be handled right now. So lastly, complacency kills is just a reminder that complacency really is a threat. That we talk about maybe a suspect being a threat, or back to the vehicle thing, we talk about a certain driving situation being a threat, speed being a threat. Complacency is kind of this, I hate to say imaginary thing, but it's this thing that's always lurking, because it really lays us open to all of the other threats that we face, because we can let our guard down, and if we're doing that at the wrong time, sometimes it just comes over time. We get comfortable in our routines, we get comfortable in what we're doing, but ultimately we have to make sure that we're keeping our attention on, back to the previous tenet, what are the things that matter right now, and am I paying attention to what's happening right now in the moment? Am I paying attention to the officer safety cues that I've been trained, in the academy, field training, all throughout my career? Or am I worrying about the, soccer game that I'm going to later? Am I worrying about, this appointment that I have to make that's maybe not work related or things like that? Am I worrying about the prisoner that I'm transporting versus worrying about what I'm going to have for lunch? And, these are all just conversations that we have to have within the law enforcement community to make ourselves better, because it is, as I'm recording this, we're sitting at still the first half of May, and we're at 58 already. We're not even halfway through the year, but we're on our way to halfway over 100 law enforcement line of duty deaths for 2024. And we're not going to be able to prevent all of them. It's still going to be a dangerous job, no matter what we try to do. But we go back to that ignored behavior is condoned behavior, predictable is preventable. All those things that we hear from Gordon Graham and others in our industry, that we have to take a hard look in the mirror, even as law enforcement officers, even as people that really we should know better, but we're still human beings at the end of the day. And we've got to be able to take steps to make sure that we're doing the right things for our community's benefit, but just for our own benefit. Because I think we all can agree that even the number 100 is too many. But for all the families that have suffered the heartache and loss of a law enforcement line of duty death. Even just getting that number back down to that World War II era number of below 100 line of duty deaths within a year would still be something that our industry can be proud of and stand behind. So as we're looking at Police Week of 2024, it gives us as law enforcement officers kind of a chance to remember, a chance to remind ourselves of what the stakes are of this job, but also hopefully it gives us an opportunity to, know that we do have some control over this. We have some control over trying to bring that number down a little bit. And as is said with below 100, we try to honor the fallen by training the living. And that's still something that we subscribe to and try to do here at the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office. That brings us to the end of this episode of the 902 podcast. We hope that you'll soak in a little bit of Police Week this year in 2024. Take a look at some of the events that are going on here in the Lincoln Lancaster County community, but there's also a lot nationally. If you haven't checked out the website below100.org, it has a lot more information and resources about the topics that I was talking about today, as well as the 5 tenets of Below 100. And there's also a couple other resources out there which were mentioned in this episode, and that being the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund, that is NLEOMF.org. And then also the Officers Down Memorial page at ODMP.org are both places that you can go to find information about law enforcement line of duty deaths throughout the United States of America. If you have additional questions about the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office and career opportunities here, please head over to www.joinlso.com. We are hiring right now through the end of May. Those applications will close up on May 26th. If you have other questions, shoot us an email over at lso@lancaster.ne.gov. Be happy to answer those for you. And also check us out on social media at LSO Nebraska, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, X. And be sure to subscribe and follow the 902 podcast wherever you enjoy listening to podcasts. Thanks for listening.